Greetings, everybody. Welcome to another exciting lecture by your favorite speaker, Dr. Ronald J. Brown. Our topic for today is the wonderful holiday of Oktoberfest, which is celebrating every October in Munich, the capital of Bavaria, or in German, in München, the capital of Bayern. Well, this is one of the holidays which started up as a minor holiday in a particular place and is now spread around the world. Very few holidays take on a global aspect like that. Well, like every holiday, Oktoberfest has its own unique and very special history. In fact, every holiday does. We tend to forget that holidays are historical. They emerge, they grow, they have all kinds of controversies. I was thinking of Mother's Day, for example. Back when a group of women decided to have a big holiday called Mother's Day and started spreading the good news and the information, well, needless to say, there was vicious opposition from women saying, wait a minute, why should I be of value and be honored just because I'm a baby machine? What if I can't have children? Is this going to look bad for me? I'm not a mother? So many people said it shouldn't be a Mother's Day, it should be a Women's Day. So some holidays have a real controversial history. Others emerge slowly, like Thanksgiving. Well, it was a local Boston, Cape Town, Cape Cod type of holiday celebrated by the Puritans, but gradually grew in importance. And around the Civil War time, when Abraham Lincoln needed a rallying call to say, but after the Civil War and this terrible war, after all, we are still Americans. And so Thanksgiving started emerging as a state holiday and then eventually as a national holiday. Other holidays are controversial, such as the religious holiday of Christmas. Many Protestants, and until today, many Protestants do not celebrate Christmas because there is no information in the Christian Bible when Jesus was born. There's no 25th in the Bible. And so many Christians said, well, if it's not the Bible, it's not Christian. It's pagan, it's Roman influence, and so it should be not celebrated. So the Puritans in England, many Baptists and Methodists and Calvinists said, we are not going to celebrate this pagan holiday. We do not know when Jesus was born. In fact, the pro and anti-Christmas factions broke into street riots in New York City back in the colonial period. So holidays have a very unique history, each of them very different. Well, our topic today, Oktoberfest, is one of the more interesting and not so scandalous holidays, unless, of course, you're a Mormon or a Muslim and you're not allowed to drink beer, but still we do have alcohol-free beer, so you can participate. But still, it is a rather pleasant holiday. Well, our outline for today, the fall holidays in the Northern Hemisphere. It's again October in the Northern Hemisphere, north of the equator, is a time of harvest. So, point two, grains, harvesting grains are part of this whole fall holiday cycle. So if you're going to have a beer fest, what better time to have it than during the harvest season in the fall? Well, those aren't exactly the origins of the Oktoberfest. It's a little bit more romantic, big love fest. The Royal Parade, which was the centerpiece of the Oktoberfest, and an update on Oktoberfest 2021 and probably what's going to be going on in the near future. So let's get started visiting the Oktoberfest. Well, there are many, many fall holidays. Fall is a very nice time for holidays. Thanksgiving. Well, it's all about food. You eat cornbread. You eat turkey. You eat sweet potatoes. You eat cranberries. It's all about food. A traditional American family would never have steak. It would never drink red wine. It would never eat white bread because the American tradition is to eat just American foods. Another holiday in the fall is the autumn equinox. This is the holiday celebrating the passage of the seasons from summer to winter. Of course, Oktoberfest is a fall holiday in the Northern Hemisphere. The end of Hajj is very often celebrated in the fall. Diwali in India, a fall holiday. Halloween in Mexico, Dias de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. It's really a major Mexican holiday celebrated in all their colorful and musical style. The Moon Festival in China, fall holiday. The Hononmonji O Esiki holiday in Japan. Many people have their fall holiday season. This is a very important part in every culture, especially in the Northern Hemisphere. The fall was a time of harvesting, which is why Thanksgiving is all about food, pumpkin pie. Now, if it was an authentic Thanksgiving, in this picture, you would not have apples because apples were brought from Europe. But you do have the pumpkin, you do have the cranberries, and you do have an ear of corn in the back. So it's almost authentic. On the right, you see Thomas Nast's famous design of Uncle Sam's Thanksgiving dinner. During the Civil War, Thanksgiving became a national holiday. And Abraham Lincoln, who's in the upper left-hand corner there, looking over the dinner table, wanted it as a holiday that could unite all Americans. So in the picture, you see recently freed African Americans, Chinese, Hispanics. You see an Native American Indian in the back. You see a fat Fifth Avenue businessman in the backside of the table, babies all over the place. And this is the season of Thanksgiving. And of course, to celebrate Thanksgiving, they're sitting at a dinner table. It's not a time to go dancing in bars. It is a time of family food celebration. Now, in ancient times, the fall harvest season was very important because you lived on a farm somewhere and you were raising grain and had a few animals and some vegetables. The food that you raised was going to either get you through the winter or it was going to result in your starvation. And so the fall holiday season was extremely important. In fact, Jews begin their new year in the fall, meaning we survived one winter, one summer, and hopefully we will have enough food to keep us through another winter. So holidays in the fall represented more than just fun, like Thanksgiving. You had your harvest and you knew already in the fall whether it was going to be a rough winter of hunger and maybe even starvation and famine, or whether it was going to be a comfortable winter with plenty of food saved up from your gardens. Now, holidays can be of various origins. In religious circles, many holidays are commanded such as Passover. I mean, it is a biblical holiday in the Jewish Bible, how it is to be celebrated, when it is to be celebrated. The Last Supper is a religious holiday or a religious celebration. Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of me." Hajj, baptism, all have their origins in religious commands. Jesus said, "Baptize, go ye therefore and baptize the nations." Sabbath is commanded by the Jewish Bible. Ramadan, the season of fasting, is commanded by the Quran. Other holidays are traditional. Christmas, there's no mention in the Bible of when Jesus was born. It was arbitrarily assigned to December 25th because that was a major Roman pagan holiday. Thanksgiving, historic roots, but there's nothing in the Bible about Thanksgiving. Valentine's Day, the feast of Saint Valentine. Israeli Independence Day or any other Independence Day, 4th of July, all have their historic roots. Saints' days. There's nothing in the Bible about St. Patrick's Day, but yet in Ireland and then spreading around the world in the Irish diaspora, it has become a major holiday and a day of celebration. It's interesting, on Long Island railroads, which I take all the time, I asked the conductor once, is it permitted to drink alcohol on the train? And he said, oh, yes, it's legal, no problem, because I was hiding my beer in a paper package. And he said, but the only day that the Long Island Railroad forbids alcohol on the trains is St. Patrick's Day. Well, so the fall is the major time of food gathering, preparing for the winter. Well, beer, as we all know, is made out of grains. It can be made out of barley, wheat, millet, sorghum. You can make rice beer. You can make beer out of corn. So the emergence of beer was directly related to the domestication of grains, meaning you didn't go out into the woods and pick a little bit of grain here and a little bit of grain there. You took the seeds, you planted them in a field near your house, you weeded them, you watered them, and then when the grain was ready, you harvested a large quantity. The domestication of grains began about well before 9000 BC. So this is 11,000 years ago or earlier. Gradually, in the Middle East, beginning in Israel, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, up into Mesopotamia, was the earliest domestication of grain. Gradually spread down into Mesopotamia, up into modern-day Turkey, and eventually down to Egypt, which started growing grains along the Nile River. So grains gradually were domesticated, and they spread around the world. Whatever was domesticated in Mesopotamia and Turkey and the Middle East spread into Persia and India, over into China, going westward into Greece and Italy, southern France, into Spain, Portugal, and North Africa. So what was domesticated first about 10,000 years ago in the Middle East spread around the globe. Now, the domestication of plants was very important. When humans domesticated horses and camels and sheep and goats, they basically had to follow these animals, always looking for fresh grass. So these people were nomads with their horses and animals roaming from place to place. So they built tents or lived in caves and constantly following their animals, looking for fresh water for them to drink and especially grass for them to eat. But with the domestication of plants, people had to settle down. They had plant a field. Boy, you had to keep wild animals from coming in and eating all your wheat or whatever you were growing. You had to protect it from enemies who were going to come in and steal it. You had to water it if there was a drought. You had to be there when it was harvest time. You had to weed it throughout the growing season. And so the domestication of plants was a major event in human evolution and in human society. Books like Bread, Beer, and the Seeds of Change, Agriculture's Imprint on World History, or A History of World Agriculture from the Neolithic Age to the current crisis. Global warming is definitely influencing our agriculture. So why did agriculture, domestication of plants, so influence human society? Well, once you plant a field with wheat or rice or corn or whatever, people have to settle down. They start building homes made out of stone or mud or bricks. They started establishing towns. Towns grew cities. Cities grew into empires with big cities and kings, priesthoods, armies. All of this was based on the production of food. So the farmer was the backbone of every civilization. If it was bad weather and the king couldn't get enough in taxes from his people, usually they paid the taxes in bushels of grain, his kingdom could be overthrown. In fact, when I was in China, I visited the Temple of Agriculture, where every spring, the Emperor of China would get in his carriage, go down the main street of Beijing, where he would cultivate the royal rice paddy to show that the emperor was also linked to agriculture. And if, hopefully, the gods would smile upon his work and bless China with an abundance of rice or wheat for that year. Gradually, as people settled down, built towns and cities and grain fields, civilizations began to emerge. Now, we do know from archaeological sites and ancient inscriptions that planting grain, harvesting grain, and making beer from the grain was part of the ancient society. Beer was very easy to make. My mother made beer at home. Any grain would do. You'd put it in with yeast and make it ferment, and it would produce alcohol. Well, beginning, it was wheat, but as it would grow in the pan, you would get stronger and stronger alcoholic beverage made from grain, which today we would call beer. In fact, archaeologists have been excavating ancient sites thousands of years ago, and they have discovered pots. And when today, with modern technology, they can scrape a little bit out of the bottom of the pot, and they can find out what was in the pot. And in Godin Tepe, in modern day Iran, they discovered a whole area where they were making beer, and the beer was left in the pot. The water evaporated, and the residue would be identified as beer made out of grain. Now, you might be surprised that they were making beer in Iran, but this was before Iran became Islamic. It was Zoroastrian and had other religions. And so beer and alcohol were a very important part of every celebration. Here we have some more pots made. The one on the left was made precisely for beer. It has that little spout sticking up, and the beer would be in there. It would be constantly working. They'd throw another handful of grain in it and some more water. And a couple of days later, you had a nice brew. And they're constantly discovering the residue of fermented grains in these ancient pots. Rice can be used for making beer. On the left, you see Anderson Valley Black Rice Ale with written in Chinese. The Chinese love rice beer. In the middle, you see the typical wheat beer, very popular in Germany and Europe. Corn beer on the right from Mexico and Central and South America. Here again, if you have a farm, you can always take some grains of corn, put them in a pot with some product to make it grow, and it becomes alcoholic. So it's a very easy thing for the average family to produce. No big technology is involved. A little bit of yeast, the corn, the rice, the wheat, the barley, or whatever, and you have a nice pot of beer. The European, especially the Germans, love to put hops in their beer. The hops is a little plant on the left. It grows on giant sticks. It's a vine, and they have it growing up onto those poles, and then they harvest the hops. And it is the hops that has a certain resin and oil that gives the beer a slightly bitter taste, a different aroma and flavor. I saw them harvesting these hops when I was traveling through Yugoslavia years ago. They would take the big pole and they would simply bend it over, and the people could stand on the ground and pick out all of the hops and put them in a big bucket, and then put the pole back up in its upright position, and it would continue to grow and to produce more hops. Well, beer expanded. If you could grow a grain in Mesopotamia, you could grow the same grain in Spain or Italy or Greece or northern India or China, or for that matter, in the United States, as well in the Southern Hemisphere. Argentina, Uruguay, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand are all in the good area for growing both wheat and grains, as well as hops. And bands, you see, at the top and in the south are the band where hops can grow. So they'll grow very well in the northern half of the United States and southern Canada, the whole way through northern China, Korea, Russia, Turkey. So the growing of grains and the growing of hops spread very easily around the world. So what's all this have to do with Oktoberfest? Well, Oktoberfest is one of these holidays that has its own unique history. It began with the marriage of King Ludwig I to Theresa of Saxony-Hildburghausen. They were married on October 12, 1810. Well, he didn't become king until 1825 when his father died. He was still a very young, dashing, handsome young man, and his wife, future wife, was a princess, and she was considered one of the most beautiful women in Europe. In fact, there were even rumors that she would marry Napoleon. Well, this royal wedding between the prince, who would one day become king, and the princess, who would one day become queen, was celebrated in great glory. The map on the left shows you where Bavaria is. It is southern Germany, bordering on Bohemia, which is today the Czech Republic and Austria. And to the north, you see the Kingdom of Prussia, the dark blue, And on the left, you see it's not too far from France. So it was one of the major and oldest kingdoms in what eventually became Germany. And back in 1810, all these little countries were independent. They each had their own kings and queens, their own armies, their own money system, their own taxes. And when Ludwig I and Theresa got married, it was one of the major social occasions of Europe. Representatives came from all over Europe to witness the marriage of this dashing young couple who would eventually, everybody knew, become the king and the queen of Bavaria. Now, this was Ludwig I. When most people talk about Ludwig of Bavaria, they're referring to Ludwig II, who was the grandson of Ludwig I. This is the mad King Ludwig II, who ruled from 1864 to 1886. He was the one who built the most romantic castle in the world, Schloss Neuschwanstein in Bavaria, which literally drove the country to bankruptcy. King Ludwig II was also a notorious homosexual, surrounded himself with good-looking young soldiers, and caused quite a scandal. Eventually, he was actually declared insane and removed from power. But here again, one of the more romantic kings of Bavaria. But we're not talking about Ludwig II. We're talking about Ludwig I. So when Ludwig and Theresa got married, it was the social occasion in all of Europe of the year. And it had to be done upright, which meant it was not going to be some church wedding and a little reception in a hall. It was going to be a royal wedding. So King Ludwig's father decided that he would take over a big area outside the city walls. The map that you see on the left is of Bavaria when it still had Munich, when it still had its city wall. And you see, it was a fortification, because there were lots of wars back in the 1800s and 1700s, and every city had to be defended by a good, strong wall. Well, of course, the wedding was going to take place in the cathedral in Munich. But then there was going to be a royal procession through the streets outside the gate to a giant open field, which was outside the city walls. And King Ludwig named this huge area as Theresa's Meadow, or Theresienwiese. And that was going to be the site of all of the festivities following the royal wedding. Well, today, Theresa's Meadow was dominated by this memorial colonnade with a statue of Bavaria. This statue was put up in 1850 to honor the state of Bavaria as a major world power at the time. So at the time when Ludwig and Theresa got married, it was just an open giant field, but on one side it had some hills, so you could build pavilions overlooking the meadow. So Ludwig and his new wife got in their chariot, and followed by all of the dignitaries from all over Europe, Germany, Austria, France, England, and they processed from the city of Munich, which you can see in the picture in the background. They processed in wagons and chariots and horses out to the giant field. On the right, you can see that there was a hill on one side, and that's where they would put up big tents and temporary pavilions for the receptions, for the dinners, for drinking. And everybody in the town went out to celebrate and observe. Well, from the beginning, to get from the city to the meadow, horses were very important. And riding horses back in the early 1800s was a very important form of entertainment and a very important part of society. Armies had horses, soldiers with their swords. Kings rode in royal carriages pulled by horses. Important people rode horses. In fact, today in New York and every city in the world, you have monuments with famous people on horseback. This is a sign of importance. Wealthy families had stables. In fact, that's how my grandfather courted my grandmother. My grandmother was from a very wealthy Protestant family from Alsace-Lorraine, which is today in France. And my grandfather was a coal miner from Slovakia. Not the kind of marriage that commonly took place back in the 1800s. Well, my grandmother, who had gone to fine schools and had her own stables and had her own horses, would go riding several times a week into the hills around the small town where they lived in southern Pennsylvania. Well, my grandfather decided that he was going to join her. So he started renting a horse and going out. Whenever he'd see my grandmother go riding, he would go riding as well. Well, needless to say, they fell in love. They got married, and much to the scandal of the family, the Slovak coal miner married the boss's daughter. And well, the rest is history. And horses, saddles, bridles, whole horse culture was part of it. Well, that marriage of October 10, with its processions, with its horse races, with its entertainments, and of course its beer, marks the very first Oktoberfest. Well, processions, observation pavilions, such as the one on the right at the bottom. You see the giant tent put up with, again, the city of Munich in the background. You see the people sitting there watching the horse races, observing the entertainments that were taking place. Even ladies like my grandmother would ride horses, and they were well-trained and well-groomed horses. Horses were part of New York history culture, too. The wealthy people of Fifth Avenue always had their stables, which were further down the street in the Upper East Side, where they had their men who would groom the horses, maintain the carriages, feed the horses. And whenever the Astors or the Vanderbilts or the Stuyvesants would want to go riding in Central Park, they would have guys bring up the carriage for the ladies or bring up the horses, and they would go riding in Central Park. Central Park still has its bridle paths, where until today you see well-to-do people riding their horses. Well, Theresa's Meadow is still noticeable on the map. It is completely surrounded these days by the extensions of Munich after the walls were torn down and the city began to grow. But still, you can see it is a major area. In the middle on the left, you see the pavilion with the statue of Bavaria on the sort of a hilltop overlooking the grounds. The grounds are filled with pavilions and filled with people drinking beer, eating, riding horses, big processions down the main drag, big parades. This is claimed by many the largest fairground in the world. Well, today the royal parade is no longer royal. I don't know if the descendants of the kings of Bavaria still attend or have anything to do with the Oktoberfest, but the parade continues, the opening ceremony. Well, today it is not dukes and kings and queens. It is wagons with beer barrels and nice, handsome young people drinking beer and waving to the masses as it goes down through Munich and out to the Theresa Meadow. Picture on the left, you see the flags, you see horse races, you see all kinds of entertainment, people standing on the hill, watching, participating. A very important part of the Oktoberfest is the celebration of Bavarian and Munich history and culture, peasant costumes, peasant dresses, Bavarian music, Bavarian dance routines, as well as Bavarian food and Bavarian beer, Munich beer, are all celebrated. In fact, a lot of people put a fortune into their traditional Bavarian costumes, and kids train for the dancing, musicians train for their musical concerts. It has a fair aspect these days with the Ferris wheel and other rides, but along the street you still see people dressed up in their traditional costumes, clubs, various people's clubs, business clubs, Rotary, church groups all participate with their delegations. You look at the picture in the upper left, you see the guy with his outfit, with his specific hat and vest. But look at the getup for the horse. And imagine how much that must cost to have all of those leather decorations made for the horse, maintaining the horse for these big holiday celebrations. So it is a big investment, a major Munich holiday event. Of course, the girls wearing their Drindelkleid, the dress of the girls, the men in their lederhosen or their leather pants. And of course, the beer stein is part of it, drinking beer. This is a view of the grounds at night. Once again, electricity took over, much like it did Coney Island and Broadway in New York, and it really made late night entertainment very popular and very safe. You can see the main drag going up and down, the picture on the right with the intersecting streets, just mobbed with people. Oktoberfest 2021, most recent one for which we have statistics. It is estimated that it was pushing 8 million attendees. Very difficult to count exactly because people show up for different periods of time, different lengths of time, stay longer. But it is one of the major events of the year. 7 million liters, which would be 1,849,204 gallons of beer. 75,500 pigs were killed in 2021 to provide sausages and roast. 116 oxen were killed for barbecues and meat, and 1,000 public toilets. I really wonder how long the lines were to get into these 1,000 public toilets when you have close to 8 million people milling around. Well, for the guys, it wasn't too much of a problem. I guess the ladies might be a little bit more embarrassed to do anything in public. But most guys, I mean, they'll pee anywhere. And if drinking all that beer, when I drink beer, it goes right through me. I mean, I'm in the bathroom. Sometimes I say I just may as well take the beer and pour it in the toilet because it doesn't stay inside me very long. Now, quality control to offer beer at the Oktoberfest. You have to get the city of Munich produced Edict of Purity. See one of the documents on the right. It's called a Reinheitsgebot, meaning the beer must be produced by one of the following Munich breweries. So you're not going to get Budweiser there or Corona beer at the Oktoberfest, at least not legally. It has to be by the Augustinerbräu, Hackenposch, Löwenbräu, Paulaner, Spätenbrau, and Stattliches Hofbrau, Munich. These are the only producers of beer who are permitted to serve their beer at the Oktoberfest. And you have to have your Edict of Purity to maintain good quality beer. Well, of course, there's the whole Oktoberfest culture, guys passing out on the ground. Luckily, in October, it's not that terribly cold. And I suppose if you have that much beer flowing through your system, that much alcohol, it could probably drop below zero and you would just sleep through it. A great job for ladies to distribute their charms and their bottles of beer and their beer. Some of the more humorous photographs can be taken. So it's a great career option for some healthy young girls. Well, the Oktoberfest is considered the largest beer festival in the world. But other cities are beginning to launch some very serious competition. A couple of years ago, I was in Berlin, and along East Berlin, the main drag of East Berlin, built by Stalin himself, formerly called the Stalinallee. Allee is the German word for boulevard. Originally, it was the Stalin's Boulevard. Then gradually it was renamed the Karl Marx Allee with typical communist architecture. It was to be the city of the future. Well, when Germany was reunited and East Berlin and West Berlin merged into the new Berlin, this monumental avenue became the site of the International Beer Festival. Now, this one claims to be even bigger than the Oktoberfest in Berlin. This is held during the month of August. When I was there, it was just mobbed with people. What is especially remarkable about this international beer festival is the fact that it is international. It's not limited to Berlin beer or German beer. As you can see, the sticker on the right, it's beer in German, Pivo, Bira, Bier, Cerveza, Biera, and it's the Internationales Berliner Beer Festival. Once again, beers from all over the world. I have never seen so many beers. Israeli beer, Mongolian beer, beers from Africa, from all over America. You name it, every country has its pavilion along the way. And once again, those trees look very green because they cannot possibly have enough toilets for them. And that's really one of the big scenes is to see 15 guys standing around watering a tree because unlike a liqueur or a wine, which you savor, beer, you drink it in quantities. Well, the Oktoberfest has spread and become a worldwide event, and it's always written in the German way. Fest is the German word for festival. October spelled with the K. For example, in Cincinnati, which has a very large German population, they even write Cincinnati in a German spelling. And a poster, this is in September. Sometimes Oktoberfest is now held earlier than October because in Cincinnati, probably by October, you'd be under 2 feet of snow. But it is still the beer festival. And places like Cincinnati all claim to have one of the major beer festivals of the world. Newport, Rhode Island. This is the Oktoberfest at 10, Texas. New York has its own Oktoberfest. And still very much stressing the German character, written in German, the one in the middle in Texas, which has a very large German population, and this one is in October. You can see the German flag. Once again, German sausages, German beer. And behind the girl, you see the wheat. Once again, reminding us of the emergence of beer with agriculture, with urbanization. Now, on the right, you see the Oktoberfest New York. You see the Bierstein, or the typical beer mug, which is a traditional part of the beer fest, although these days they use more glasses with a handle on them as a mug rather than the old Bierstein. But many of these old Biersteins were highly painted, very elegant souvenirs. This is another one on Oktoberfest, the Fiesta Nacional de la Cerveza in South America, in Argentina. Once again, the German flag and the Argentinian flag. Argentina and South America in general. Every city has a huge German population, especially Chile, Argentina, and southern Brazil. Large German populations. You even have Oktoberfest tour travel. These are the clearinghouses for the biggest, the most famous beer festivals on the face of the earth. Again, like St. Patrick's Day in New York, these holidays earn lots of money for the sponsoring cities. So that brings us to an end of this exciting discovery of the wonderful world of beer, focusing again on the Oktoberfest, but also would be the festival of any of the major cities of the world. And beer remains until today a very important part of modern civilization. Just as soon as people became sedentary and started domesticating plants, well, beer happened. And it has remained one of the major attributes of human civilization. I often wonder when they send these space capsules into space to contact other civilizations, they should really include a case of beer. I mean, it would be a welcoming sign for aliens that we are a peaceful people. We do not intend to conquer them and to murder them, but we want to sit down and have a beer with them. And so on the left, you see the World Atlas of Beer, the essential guide to the beers of the world. On the right, again, that's me. I'm not drinking beer there, but I am dressed for October weather. So if you have any questions or comments, or you'd like to add something to my presentation, feel free to contact me at ronbrownmedia@gmail.com, and I will respond to your comments, criticisms, or what I love to hear are additions, what I could add to this recording to make it even better. So once again, this is Dr. Ronald J. Brown logging off. In fact, I'm just about ready to go have a beer after all this talk. So I hope to see you again in the near future. Hope you enjoyed the program and looking forward to seeing you again. So Ron Brown logging off.